Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. Can you hear me? Sorry, can you hear me? Oh, there you go. Okay. So 2 things before I start. And first of all, thank you very much for having me. Over the next 40 minutes, I want to give you some inspiring stories and some ideas of what innovation could be for you. Now, there's a couple of important elements to know. The first thing is, who is the startup guy in the room? The one that got those shoes, right? That's the first thing you're going to notice. By the way, great job on the hoodie there. That's almost part of it. The second thing is, I don't speak your language, unfortunately, but I heard 3 words that I could recognize: iPhone, iPad, and Startupbootcamp. So I figured it was my turn to get on stage. That's about my language level here. I wanted to give you an overview of some of the lessons that we learned over the years looking at innovating with corporate partners. I was myself on the dark side for many years, and you'll get to see that. But that's me. You see me on stage a lot. I'm a mix of all those different things, from a founder to a funder, an advisor. As I said, an ex-corporate guy. I do blog a lot. I do speak sometimes. I'm an innovation lover. I do commute. I'm a father. I'm a lot of different things. But the one thing you want to keep in mind is this: I'm definitely passionate about innovation, to a point that I browse the world in speaking on stage about it, because I believe that there are so many more companies that deserve to know how to innovate and get to the next level. So, as I said, I wasn't always like that, because I spent quite a number of years in this company that you heard about before, I'm sure, that little Apple thing. And I was very lucky to join back in the days before we launched the iPod, which was the very early days of 98, 99. And of course, over the course of a few years, I saw this launch. You remember this one? How many of you had that? Not bad. Not bad. All right. Then came along this little thing as well, 2007. How many of you? Yeah, well, in the corporate world, not many, I can tell you that, because it was like totally forbidden. It was like, this is a toy, you cannot use this. The CFOs and the CEOs were saying, I need this because my son showed me this, it's incredible, but come on, this is just for songs, right? You're not doing any of this. A couple of years later, I was in charge of iPhone and iPad for business, the worst potential title you can get when it comes to looking at a corporation, because it was either Nokia or BlackBerry territory, right? In the corporate world, everybody was looking and trusting those devices, so selling those. Then came the iPad, and every CFO said, okay, I need to have this. Yeah, but a couple of months before you said, this is not secure enough on the iPhone. Oh, yeah, but it doesn't matter, I want to have this. So this is, again, disruption at the core. Same OS, same company, same product, but just different stages. We've seen a lot of evolution of this, from the very first OS, which, by the way, was buggy as hell. It's a true story. Came on, to evolve over the years in creating the best and most stable things. But innovation came not only on the hardware and the software side, we also had a lot of innovation on this, right? How many of you have gone to an Apple store recently? Yeah? This is quite staggering. The amount of work that went into the very first Apple store, which is the one on the top left-hand, the Fifth Avenue one in New York. I remember having a conversation with Cupertino and Steve at the time when they were talking about how they would get those glass panels shipped from Italy. Not exactly the closest place to get glass, but it doesn't matter. They wanted to have the best of the best, and they could afford it, of course. And one of their reasons for this is there was nothing existing in the market in the US to render that polished, impressive transparency that they wanted to have. So innovation came at every kind of level, and the evolution came also inside the experience. You see the last one on the bottom left is one of the latest stores that they've created, which is a complete different customer experience. The word here is experience. Innovation comes not only from the device itself, it comes from your number one priority when it comes to looking at what you have in your hand, is what is the number one thing you do? You use your device. If the device is unusable, your experience is crippled. And so it comes from walking in the store, getting through to the help you can get, finding what you need without having to cripple through piles of different devices and trying to ask 5 different people, orient you to another one, right? We've all seen that retail experience. Of course, one fast. The last iteration of that experience for us was this, right? This is the latest headquarters of Apple in Cupertino, which is totally staggering, mind-blowing. I've seen the plans back in the days, and I haven't had the chance to be there yet. I've been invited, but I need to go. And it's just incredible, the quality of execution on that. But also over the years, the company evolved. And from what used to be a very small company, it became that massive corporation, which right now is the biggest company in the world in terms of valuation. And behind the scene, of course, what you know, and you know that very well, there's also this, which is a little bit less sexy when it comes to, at least for me, when it comes to the look of it. I'm sure you guys love that, need that, at least. So the point here is, innovation comes at every level, but doesn't come without a certain element of compromise. And from young companies to bigger companies, this is where disruption needs to be maintained. So that's what I want to go through with you today. A short video to start with.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Right. So that's not yesterday. It's not exactly the most modern thing, but it is still very true. The core message here is that whether you believe that they went to the moon or not is irrelevant. This is the hardest thing you can do. And when it comes to having a company that needs to turn around such a massive shift in culture, this is not going to be the easiest thing to do. At any point in time, you can have difficulties. You'll have multiple barriers. But you don't do it because it's simple. You do it because you believe this is the right thing to do, because you believe at the core of your strategy you need to innovate if you don't want to be dying, if you don't want to become a dinosaur, if you don't want to be having your lunch hidden by those small corporations and startups that are building up something that you haven't anticipated. So it's exactly this. It's that important thing. So those guys did not really have any, have it easy. They died along the way, but then they ended up being on the moon. So don't take it easy. Just think that you can do that. Of course, this is another example. How many of you knew what that is? Anyone? Not yet. How about that? Rings a bell? Okay. This should be ringing a bell. Yeah, we all have one at home, I hope. Maybe not this model, but this is a true thing, right? So this is the uni Hoover created by this English gentleman called Dyson. I'm sure most of you know that, right? So king at design, is an incredibly smart man. How many iterations do you think it took him to get to that design? How many models and trial he's done before getting to this, which looks either weird but also simple, right? Just take a wild guess. Raise your hand. Come on, go ahead. 1,000? Anything else? Right. A little bit more. 5,127 versions of the device before getting to what is today one of the most selling products in the history of Hoovers. Then again, not that long of a history, but still. That doesn't happen easy, right? It takes time, it takes iteration, it takes a lot of will. But at the end, this is one of the most selling products in the world. Again, not because it's easy. Now let me get to the core of this. We are in the middle of a real entrepreneurial revolution. If anyone is doubting this, you're in the wrong room, clearly. There is, at the core of this as well, something that is truly new, because digital is not new, but the innovation in the corporate world through the digital agenda is kind of new at this level. We've never had that many young companies disrupting the big conglomerates, the incumbents, as we call them, the original winners. Not that many. And so this is what it used to be before the internet. I'm sure most of you remember that, right? It was really hard to get a product out, startup failure rates, very high as well. Innovation was limited to a few regions. You were sort of segmented between your different regions. You didn't have any investors out there, or very few. The very first venture capital got created back in the 80s in the Valley, but they invested in pure hardcore boxes, like the few HPs shipping out there. This was very slow. Nowadays, this is what we see. total liberalization of ideas, fast-paced going to market. The time to market has never been shorter than today. You know, large pool of capital risk wherever you go, including the Baltics and Nordics. There's tons, not enough, but there's quite a number. Global innovation everywhere, fast customer adoption rate. So it goes faster and faster and faster and faster. Of course, we only see the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more happening behind the scene. So those new technology trends are easy to understand, but they're very hard to implement. And so, as you can read there, you know, hard to develop new things in big organizations because it tends to be that organizations rely on stability, processes, some extent, you know, finance and risk taking is not exactly the #1 thing that you tend to do. On the other side, this. Who's seen this book before? I hope you have. Anyone else? 10 people? Okay, so I really encourage you to read this book because this is going to be such a departure from what you know that it will raise at least a couple of questions behind why aren't we doing this yet? Why is that something we should read about in a book? Why isn't this something that we already have internally? This was not a revolution, but simply put, this gentleman, Eric Ries, created this new movement of what in the corporate world we call agile, adapted to a fast-paced environment, which is lean. Okay? Have a read. This is incredible. Fast reading. Really good. And of course, this is what we're talking about here. How do you adapt those new methodologies? From agility to Scrum to validation boards to strategizing, pre-mediation. Mediation sounds like a dirty word to many corporations. It is not. This is the core of supporting the exercise that innovators are bringing to a company. You need constellation prices most of the time when you're changing your roles. You need people to help you through that transformation. You know the famous culture change word that we have out there? Those are the reason why we have those mediators coming through. Growth hacking, again, strange word, but it helps understanding, you know, the methodology behind supporting the ecosystem and giving you those tools to accelerate. That's what we do at Startupbootcamp, day in, day out. You know, on average, we see about 15,000 startups a year across the world. So of course, that's a lot of companies, that's a lot of ideas, that's a lot of funders. And as you know, in this particular world, you know, about 80% of them don't make it, really. They start, they try, they fail, they start again, etc. And we'll go back to that. But they are from those garages of the world. Less garages today than it used to be in the Valley, but still they're scrubbing to do that, you know, from wherever they can, you know, massing in a small flat, 6 or 7 funders, trying to get this first prototyping out, getting this done. And on the other side of the world, you got people that have got massive offices and don't understand what they're trying to do. It's a caricature, but not that much. Have a quick look at this. The Startupbootcamp IoT is an innovation program that focuses on helping the most promising entrepreneurs getting to scale the company to the next level. So what we do is we connect them to partners, mentors, and the whole ecosystem to help them grow quicker and get access to full-on funding.
For our company, it's very important to be part of this kind of program because as an asset-based finance company, we finance assets, we finance equipment. So for that reason, we are very interested in finding new technologies and new ways to gather data from the assets that we finance and to be able to gather them, interpret them, and use them as valuable information to build our value proposition.
For Cisco, it's a real great opportunity to get in at the very earliest stage and see emerging ideas across a diversity of different types of sectors, different technologies, and really see some opportunities to work and help businesses at the earliest possible stage.
So the reason I wanted to show you this is because what we do at Startupbootcamp is a combination of things. We identify those early innovators around the world, and you can see we have about 20 programs around the world in various different locations, but we connect them to the relevant people, and the magic happens when we make them work together. That's the hard part. You know, when we talked about doing the hard thing, this is the hard part, because that culture shock that we have between you know, a corporation and a young innovator, we need to be in the middle to facilitate that transaction, because it doesn't always happen. Some very smart individuals will make it happen, but the resilience of the organization makes it impossible to translate into any actionable real sort of reality. So we connect the dots, and so you could see, you've seen 2 or 3 companies talking about what we do, and I could go over more of this, but it's important to realize that this is where the magic happens. This is where, when we facilitate that introduction, we connect them to important people inside the corporation from the top down, then we connect them to the right mentors, and we help them, of course, get funding by connecting them to investors. The whole ecosystem support those innovators, get them to a point where you guys can start working with them. And so, to give you an example, in London, where I launched a program a couple of years ago, we have on average, 1,000 plus startups that we talk to. We tend to have between 300 and 400 startups applying to the program itself from this year, 51 countries. Right? So that's the diversity of people that we can find. And we bring them back to make sure they can work with those corporations. And this is what it looks like a little bit. We had this is our selection days, just to give you a brief overview. So we bring those 20 to 30 shortlisted. We put them in a room through a rotation, a bit like this room, with round tables. They go through a rotation with mentors, and the mentors give us a lot of feedback on a couple of key things. And keep that in mind. Those are important elements for you when you get to meet potentially some startup down the line. Quality of the team, product market fit, ability to scale, and of course down the line, if there is a demand for this particular product. The last piece, which is important for the markets and for the company, do you actually need the product inside your corporation? Of course, we have a set of partners. You can see them on the banner on the right side. From Inmarsat to Rolls-Royce to Cisco, those are pretty big corporations that have needs, and we try to bring those needs specifically to them as well. It's a mentor-driven program. I love the fact that we give first, and they don't really ask for anything in return. So those mentors are here to help. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because in 3 months, that's why it's called an accelerator. We accelerate, we help them do what normally a startup takes more than 18 months to do. Now, that fast-paced environment is critical in the world of innovation, and it's hard to sustain because when you're a small team, it works. When you try to implement that in that same fast pace in an environment where you have, level of decision process, this is where the friction begins. The end of the program every year is a big reveal. A bit like this one, we have about 500 people in a room, and those guys have been trained, burned hard to the ground to make them presentation and show the best that they have. We have on average, 15 plus follow-up per team. They raise on average 600 to 700 pounds, 7,000 euros. But more than that, I want to show you another video, which again, you'll see my face. Apologies for this. That's a lot of me on the screen. But just to give you a bit of background of what is the ambience and the atmosphere behind what innovators are really caring about. And you get to see also a few of the partners giving you some feedback on what they've done during those few months. So the last 3 months have been incredible. We've had so much momentum with our team. This year, a little bit more mature, a bit more advanced teams, and so much diversity. So it's been an incredible program. We've had so much traction, so many people coming through, from mentors to partners supporting the team.
Today was fantastic, especially the progress they've made over the period of practicing their pitches and refining their product. They've done such a phenomenal job, and today was a really, really good culmination of a perfect program.
Wow, it was amazing. I mean, from the moment we came in, we heard the music, we saw the banners, the lights. It was amazing, mind-blowing.
I like Startup Bootcamp because they take a very global approach, and that is a really nice thing, the diversity of the teams and the origin of the ideas that can come from anywhere.
So this is the second year we are partnered with Startup Bootcamp. I think this is a great year. We've engaged very deeply into the program. It's fantastic. It's very good to see how all those startups have developed their proposition.
Partnering with Startup Bootcamp for the demo day has been an amazing experience. The venue's awesome. All of their demo days are really impressive, and I think this one really stands out.
So, again, the reason why I show you this is because what you see here is the ultimate exercise of showing and disrupting innovation at the, in front of an audience of people that might not understand exactly what this is. And from there on, I want to give you some clues on what are the best practices on how to get innovation incorporated inside your organization. But keep in mind this particular video, because what matters to most of the people that we work with, and we have worked with a lot of corporations around the world, what matters to them is the culture change, the ways to innovate it. This is just a fraction of some of the partners that we work with. We have 5 fintech programs around the world. Fintech, you understand what it is, obviously financial tech. And from Singapore to New York to London to Mumbai, of course, the ecosystems are completely different. The way people react, the way people work, the way people innovate are different. And from one corporation to the other, from one bank, one industry to the other, the way they function is different. And so when a young company comes with a breakthrough innovative idea, they need to target several different markets. And it's extremely hard to match those different requirements. And so that's what we do. We are in the middle. So why do the company work with us? Right? What do we do with them? The first thing is we're bringing a lot of business intelligence behind that early stage trend idea. You know, where are those ideas coming from? What are they doing? How could they be important for you? The second thing is, of course, we talked about cultural change a little bit, and we facilitate that. We help do internal sort of workshops and helping some of the key stakeholders in the companies understanding how to adapt, how to change, how to understand, how to interpret those different sort of waves of innovation. Third, again, learning and inspiration from the ground up. We invite people over to the program to work with those innovators hand in hand, not remotely, not out of a Skype call, not out of a global room with tens of people, hand in hand, one-to-ones, and understanding from the ground up how they work, you know, literally getting their hands dirty. And it works, of course. We invite them as mentors. So each of our partners have 2 or 3 people. That's a good way to get your hands inside this particular movement. Bring them inside the corporation. I'll give you another example later from one of our partners done that to the next level, literally. We help with thought leadership ideas. From time to time, we get some of our partners that have trusting us for years, coming in saying we need to change that direction. Do you have any ideas about this? Have you seen some companies, young companies innovating, helping us driving a bit that boat? So we can help with that as well. And of course, give visibility inside our ecosystem. I don't know how many of you work already in the startup world, because that's a big room with many different industries there. But I understand there's a couple of you who've already created innovation centers. Trust me, this is not good enough. It needs to be internally implemented. It's not just creating a separate entity. This is the beginning of it. It needs to start somewhere, but more needs to be done. And of course, we connect you with startups. Now, the startups on their side work very differently, right? They're lean, they're agile, they're fast, they always need money. No, of course, they always need money. And they don't necessarily understand why the big corporations are so slow. On the other side, the corporations, well, they're quite risk adverse, they're quite slow, they have quite a number of procedures, they're strong brands, so they want to protect that brand. There's definitely lots of brain power, but it's kind of capitalized in one part of the industry and one part of the company, not necessarily being split across. They work a bit like an immune system. They're protecting themselves, which is fair. You have a big business, you know what to lose. You don't want to lose it, right? So how do you find that in the middle, right? What do you do? A couple of ideas. First of all, seems trivial, but you need to know your organization very well. Most of the time, the people that make this happen internally are people that know how to navigate the organization, that are not secluded in silo. Because then you need to have that as a strategy across the board. You cannot just have that in one separate part of the organization. If you do that, it doesn't replicate and there's no impact. So when we said top-down exercise, it is literally a top-down exercise. It needs to be from the top, a strategic angle to want to innovate and replicate that across the organization. Takes time, it's hard, again, doing the hard thing, but it's the right way to do it. Get involved in the ecosystem. Don't just look at it from afar. Participate in the meetups out there. Participate to DFF, those conferences, those technology conferences. Get involved in the ecosystem with those funders, those investors, those young entrepreneurs. Get to understand a little bit what's happening there. You get to, realize also that they need to move fast and try to adapt a little bit. Have an ambassador in your company, somebody who's maybe a little bit more agile on that, and get to help those companies get inside and navigate the organization. On the other side, if you want to invest in them, indeed, you need to, don't look just at the idea. That's one of the key things, the top left, top right here. Most of the company that we see look at the idea, they love it, and say, okay, can we do that ourselves? That's the wrong way of doing it, obviously. Not only because you're screwing the company, but also because at the end of the day, it doesn't just take an idea. It's about the implementation. It's about the execution. And if you want to invest in them, they always need more time to reach the milestones. When we set a deadline, those quarterly reports that we do every time in corporation, you need to report this particular progress, and every quarter there's a new progress report. They don't work like this. They have milestones, but they're not on a quarterly basis. They're based on market reach. They're based on fundraising. They're based on product delivery. They're based on customer traction. Different KPIs. The don'ts, those are key ones. Don't kill them with bureaucracy, please. I mean, I know it seems trivial again, but this is a classic example. The time to pay a company, your payment terms? Yeah, if you have more than 90 days, that's the death of a startup right there. Again, I understand, because we're working with most of this corporation. When you work with a Rolls-Royce, the procurement is the #1 contact that I have. Tough one. We don't speak the same language, clearly. But also, when I say, why can we maybe shorten that time? Well, I need to sort of validate that internally, our process of this, the politics that it's stake, I need to speak to it. No. This is dead. So kill them with compliance regulation. That's it. That's the end of innovation right there. Some of the successes that we've seen recently in many of the corporations that managed to incorporate that innovation bypassed those processes. Bypass this, heavy bureaucratic procurement calls. Again, not easy. You're going to go against the flow. You're going to go against the organization. You're going to go against what you've always known. But this is necessary, because if you don't do this, that's it. There's no innovation incoming. This is just a regular business as usual. Does that come as a surprise to any of you that the #1 thing that matters in a company, whether small or big, is the team? Hopefully not, right? Team. Of course. Always going to be the team first. But again, this is a recent study which, it's a bit scary, but it's kind of true. 79% of all employees don't trust their management. Of course, the study's a lot longer than just that flying guy in the back. There's real, sort of heavy sort of questions behind this, but that's the end of the story. If you're in a big corporation and you come as an outsider and say, hey, I've got an amazing idea, I've seen this incredible company, we should get in there. The #1 response is like, what? What idea? Did you do did you talk to your customer? Did you do your sales first? If you're reporting on this, if you talked to Stephen from accounting, have you done well, that's it. You're dead. So the trust is key. And there's one thing that this new generation of people that are most of them creators, called millennials, there's a reason why they don't care about going in big corporations anymore. How many of you have millennials around them, either kids, children of yours, or friends? Have you ever talked to them? Yeah? Just how hard is it? Yeah? Sucks, huh? I know. Well, I work with them all the time. It's hard. They don't work the same way. They have a very different view on how they attack the business. Basically, the #1 thing is, I don't want to get into a big corporation. I'm going to shift from company pretty much every 6 to 8 months. Yeah, but you don't learn. That's all right. I'm going to learn along the way. Yeah, but you can't capitalize. I don't need to capitalize. By the way, I don't want to own a car. I don't want to buy a house. I'm going to be a nomad. So, different way of doing and living from everything we've known so far. But that's the reality of that new generation coming in. They'll need to calm down after a while, because clearly that's not sustainable. We all understand that. But for the next 10 to 15 years, the people that are going to be bringing innovation to the market are those people. So you need to think that they will not be able to understand the way this type of corporation function, because that's against everything they believe in. Everything. You know this guy. I mean, I don't have to tell you that this was the best years of my life. I was inspired by him every day, and I was lucky enough to work with him directly. And I could tell you stories and stories. We have dinner for that later. But don't hire clever people and tell them what to do. Let them, tell you how you can improve. It's a bit of a shock, because he did listen to a few people, but not a lot, truth be told, because he had so many ideas himself. But this is very important. There's this true thing about only hire 9+ people in your life. The very, very successful people tend to stop at 10. Directly hire 10 people. Everything else needs to be done by somebody else. Because if you hire 10 A players, those A players will hire 10 A players, will hire another 10 A players. You cannot sustain a hire of like 200 people at an A level. And you want A players, you don't want B players. So this is a truth behind, innovating as well. Distrust versus trust. Very, very, very hard to maintain that. Distrust, time records, expense policies, fixed hours, fixed number of vacation days. On the other side, from the very innovative companies we've seen out there, including big ones, by the way, people decide themselves when they want to work. They ask, if they like the company, create entrepreneurs internally. Some even share across the board the salary sheet from CEO down to the level. Everybody knows what everybody is making. It's a bit drastic, but it works in some companies, not everywhere. It's about being transparent. So again, we had a couple of lessons. Don't do the corporate thing. Don't sort of slow them down. Don't cripple them with procurement calls and procurement processes. Also be transparent inside your corporation, because at the end of the day, if you're not, you need to fail fast and often. You know that policy of failing? 7 years ago, we brought back to Europe one of the things I liked about the US, which is a lot of things I don't like about the Americans, but they do this very, very well. They embrace failure. In Europe, we're scared of failing. We really hate this. So they created a conference called FailCon, which as the name says, failing, conference. The only thing people were talking about on stage was their failures. The only thing they were talking about is the mistake they made. Try to inspire people not to make those mistakes again. Learn from others, right? FailCon was an incredible momentum in our industry because people basically finally realized, okay, hold on, we can learn from others. We don't have to do that same thing again and again and again. And so this was pure innovative thinking as well, bringing those learnings to the mass. And of course, from similar idea, when you hire 10 A players, when you help 10 players that are actually understanding not to do this stupid thing, then you get to replicate that faster. So we've seen a lot of don'ts over the times. And again, I want to give you some key recipes. It will not apply to everyone, as most of my presentation, by the way. It will not apply at every moment of your career, but there's a couple of things that we've seen. On the left side, your innovators. On the right side, your corporates, managers, whatever you will call them. A couple of key examples. We had the first 8 failures. Well, that's unacceptable. See 2 different views on that, right? The innovators would go, we have a totally new brand product. It's exciting. It's the most embracing thing you've ever seen. The lawyers say, we don't really have precedent for that. We might get sued. Can we do that? Typical answer. Another one. We want to use external services, new vendors, because of course we want to be scaling our program, etc. Ooh, they're not approved. I mean, come on, you've seen that before, right? The procurement thing. And again, we made it. We finally get our product. Now, can we get a bit of money to make that work? Sure. What's your 5-year pro forma model? So again, those are classic examples. So how do you innovate from there? How do you make it work? How do you transfer from that model, which is a bit of a caricature, I admit. Not every company does that, but just to give for the sake of it, how do you innovate from there? So the first thing is, as I said, it starts with a C level. If you don't have the buy-in from your top management, this is going to be an experiment. And that will stop very, very quickly. So that's the number one thing. It starts from the board, executive board decision, building support from those stakeholders, from the top end. You want to have that people, that people engagement. But how does it work, right? So need to understand the difference between entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. Everybody familiar with intrapreneurs? You take people from the outside, you bring them back in, and you make them work inside an organization. That doesn't really work most of the time. But when you take somebody who's a little bit more innovative at the core, and you turn them into some entrepreneurs inside the organization, they are intrapreneurs. And those are the ones that are dragging the innovation, that are pushing the message. Differentiating between managing and mentoring as well. The managing is the no-nos. The mentoring is, yes, let's do it. Let's do it together. Then the manager will tell you, shut down, sit down, don't do this. The mentors will say, let me help you do this. Let's get up, let's make fun, let's make this happen, let's get this organization moving. So managing and mentoring, two different attitudes, can come from the same person. It just have to be a different shift in mentality. Also, take the teams outside of the building. How many of you do regular sort of green days or whatever? Take those teams out. Well, you are out today, obviously. But no? Not much, huh? Okay. This is key. You need to do that as well to help them get out. Most innovation comes from experimenting, pivoting, and the new strategic thinking, coming from different things. Because at the end of the day, those ideas, they don't count if they're not executed properly. It's about execution. And most of those companies you see on the screen are incredibly good at executing and very nimble about it. Not a lot of resources, and yet they make it happen. So you need to be the organization that is able to have this entrepreneurial mindset, can facilitate talents, are willing to take risks. That is not a small one. It seems, again, simple, but it's not, because at every step of the way, you'll get some barriers in front of you. You need to run experiments, build, measure, learn, fail, start again, try it again. And you need to have the space to do it, right? So I think, over the course of the last few minutes, I've told you why you should do this, so I'm going to go over that. But basically, how to do it. As I said, a couple of different ways of doing this. Oops, sorry, it's going too fast. You can participate in some different things internally. You could try to facilitate that with at the board level, change the mindset. You can onboard people like us to help you with your master classes and also join startup innovations and ecosystem. You can also create your own accelerator, which I not recommend unless you've already done it before. It's all about the mindset and the skill set. It's not about the engagement. And the goal of those startups is to really create that repeatable and scalable business. And if you get very quickly out of resources, like most of those companies are, and if you get to be working with a company that sort of slow you down most of the time, you never get to market. And so you guys don't get to have those guys on board. Kind of questions not to ask. When will you get to revenue? How much revenue will you get? When you get that product out? When you're ready to launch? Don't try to be an expert. Those are the questions that are not really interesting for them, but also things that you not know. The question you should ask is those. I can share those slides, by the way. You can see in more details because we are running out of time. But there's a lot of different things. Is it big enough? Are you bold enough? What are the 5 different ways you can make this work? Who else in your team can make this happen? Who inside the organization is going to be championing that idea? Those are the key questions. I'm going to skip over that for now. But just give you an example that we had about validated learnings. I mentioned earlier. Of course, you know those guys, right? Lloyds Bank? Just a quick story to close. Lloyds Bank had been a partner of Startupbootcamp for 7 years now. Lloyds is not exactly the most agile organization. They're pretty heavy. They're slow burn, old school, velvet wall kind of bank inside London, old school district, not the innovative type at all. We got lucky enough to be introduced to the top management because they were ready to listen. What happened is we offered them to work with us on different levels. From the corporate innovation standpoint, we had a couple of teams helping them on some specific element of their financial sort of strategy. But also one of the things that we offered them was to invite a in-residence person, EIR, which in our lingo is entrepreneur in residence, but in their lingo turned into executive in residence. And so for 6 months, we had the number 2 of the board of Lloyds Bank sitting inside our co-working space with 27 young entrepreneurs. Talk about a culture shock. So first of all, came in with that so classic 3-piece suit and stripes and the right collar and the tie and everything. By the end of the next 3 weeks, he was wearing jeans. By the way, I forgot to mention, 62-year-old male, which is not exactly your innovative type either. Wearing jeans, getting into the groove of things, and by the end of the 3 months, he didn't want to go back to work. So that innovative thinking doesn't happen just by miracle. But the lesson here was more than just that. What happened during those 3 months is he developed a few key ideas because those ideas would have never got them inside this corporation. The think outside the box is something that happens when you extract yourself from your daily routine, when you extract yourself from your environment, when you're in your ivory tower by the Thames, you don't get really innovation to knock at the door because this is not what you do and you don't have time for it. When you take yourself out of that equation and you try to get a little bit more thinking inside, and you get to be inspired by young generation, new people that have ideas bombing into you all the time, then suddenly it resonates that you can still innovate. Whatever your age, whatever your style, it doesn't matter. As long as you're ready for it, it can work. At the end of those 6 months, Lloyd Banks implemented 3 of the 5 ideas that this gentleman brought back to the corporation. 6 months. If Lloyd Bank can do it, I can tell you everyone in that room can. So think ahead, think outside of the box, and trust me, if you have a will to change, to be more innovative, to get inspired by people, reach out. I'll be happy to help. Thanks very much.